Hey everyone, in this video we're going to cover one of the principles for reading and writing, specifically the aboutness principle. So, by the end of this video, you should be able to define the properties of the aboutness principle, and you should be able to apply it to improve your academic literacy, i.e. your ability to read and write college-level texts. Because this is and why we're going to do this? Because this is a fairly foundational skill, and you will start to notice that this applies to almost everything that you read and write. This is not just a foundational skill, but it's actually kind of just how we structure English. So cool. So what is the aboutness principle? It is the idea that all text, whether it's a word, a sentence, a paragraph, an essay, a chapter, a book, whatever it is, it doesn't even have to be a piece of writing, TBH, are built around a core idea or purpose. And that helps us create coherence. So you can see it in words, I think, really well. So if we just take the word act, that is a concept by itself, very simple, very easy to understand. But if we start building ideas around it by adding a prefix, for example, we take that concept act and we turn it into interact, which, complicates that idea. It gives us a more precise meaning of, interacting. And then we can take that idea and we can add a suffix to it, interactive, to describe something like a video game, a class, a piece of media. It becomes a property. If we then add ness to it. So interactiveness then becomes the property of being interactive. You can do the same thing with stress, where if we add some suffixes like stressful, you take something and you start to describe how it feels. And then again, you can add ness to it to describe the property of being stressful. The stressfulness of this class is really getting to me. Take the word employ. We can add ability. We turn that into your ability to get employed, or we add the prefix un, and we totally change that concept. But you can see that all of these words are built around a core concept that we add to make it more precise, to make it more complicated, stuff like that. And this is the basic process of how we decode and recode language, how we read and how we write it. Or talk it too, I guess. Okay, so let's take an example and just look at this paragraph that is in a book that I'll tell you in a second. But if we just look at it, the very premise for general writing courses such as composition is that students, once they complete their English composition requirements, will properly be schooled in blah, 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 blah. Well, we might ask ourselves, how can we know what this paragraph is about? Well, to start, there are a few strategies that we want to employ first. Like, what's it published in? So if we look at this is published in a chapter called Academic Literacies in a book called The College Fear Factor, which was published in 2009, getting a little old, on page 146, and it was written by Rebecca Cox. So if we just look at the titles of things, like the title of the chapter, that sort of tells us what the chapter is going to be about. This is the core idea of the chapter that everything else revolves around. And then it has a section heading too, called The False Promise of Composition. And so we know that everything within this section is going to revolve around this concept. And we can kind of see that if we just look at the first and last sentences of this paragraph, where this first one is talking about the very premise for general writing courses, such as composition, and the last paragraph is talking about, a single writing course. So we can start to see that all of these are about your ability to read and write in college. Then we're going to talk probably about a composition class like this, which is confirmed by the first paragraph's first and last sentences. So how could we see this in action? Because we can also break this down not only at a paragraph level or a chapter level like I talked about, but also at a sentence level. So we know that the first sentence is about the very premise for general writing courses such as composition. If we look at the second sentence, which is talking about cognitive or research and cognition and learning over the past several decades, well, that's what that one is about. Then we go on to find that it's highly flawed, but then we have this colon here. And a colon introduces something else for emphasis. And so it can introduce an entirely new sentence, which it kind of does here. Not kind of, it absolutely does. So it does this. So we actually have two here. We have this sentence, and you could even think about this as like a comma and. It's not really doing that, but kinda. We'll learn more about the colon in the next video. So again, we have two things here, and then we go into the next one where we see at the very beginning, applying new skills in new contexts. So that's what that sentence is about. And then the final one, we have it, which is very unclear because you think it's probably going to be referring back to the previous sentence, but it's not. Because you could ask yourself this: what is unreasonable? Well, what is unreasonable? To imagine that a single writing course can adequately prepare students for all of the writing tasks that they may face in college. Sorry, that college got cut off there. So again, we can see that the "it" is actually referring to this part at the end here, not at the beginning. And you can flip this sentence: to imagine that a single writing course can adequately prepare students is unreasonable. Makes the same amount of sense. Okay, so if we take all of this, we might ask ourselves, based off of that paragraph alone, what is the false promise of composition? Well, it's that a single writing course can prepare you sufficiently for all college writing. And from that paragraph, we can see that it's a highly flawed premise to begin with, that that's backed up with decades of cognitive research, that we learn that transferring skills is not automatic. We learn that that's because applying skills is complex and sort of dependent on the environment that you produce them in, or use them in, or learn them in. And so because of those factors, it becomes unreasonable to imagine that a composition class can do all of the work to prepare you for college. And so if we wanted to summarize that, we might summarize that entire paragraph as: the writing skills developed in composition classes might not get applied in other classes because transfer of knowledge to other contexts isn't easy or automatic, as research has indicated for decades. So you can see here that I've been able to turn that entire 6-sentence paragraph into one sentence. And the aboutness principle is basically how I do that. And so again, we can even look here. I'm doing the same thing. You can ask yourself, does this feel like a correct summary of what this paragraph is about? The writing skills developed on composition classes. Sure, some of the other things weren't totally immediately connected to them, but you can see how these are sub-ideas to support the other ideas about writing skills. So again, you can do that on your own. If we look at another paragraph in that same section, we can ask ourselves, well, what is that paragraph about? Pull it up, just go sentence by sentence looking for it. Well, this sentence is doing that same thing that that last sentence was doing. It's putting it at the end. The kinds of writing skills required in blah, blah, blah may vary immensely, is one reason for this discrepancy. We can see here that good writing in one context is that sentence. Writing skills, like any other skills in this one. Writing skills, a person, but if we look in this sentence, a person does not simply write, or a person writes. So we can see that write is still a core idea, even though it's shifted to the verb here. So it's not really what the sentence is about now. Again, learning how to write according to different disciplines. Studies demonstrate, but we can see the studies about what? Learning how to write for a specific professional context. So if we ask ourselves, what is this paragraph about? Look at all of it. What do you think it's probably about? Writing skills. And then you can ask yourself the same question that we would do to get to the summary. What is this paragraph claiming about that paragraph, or about that topic? What is this paragraph claiming about writing skills? Writing skills do what? And that's how you can arrive at a summary of your paragraph. So we want to just remember to start summarizing that all texts are built around a core topic, idea, or purpose, and that's how we start to create coherence. And that writers do that by restating topics explicitly, often with synonyms, as you just saw. We use the word writing skills, composition, interchangeably. We talk about learning how to write, but we use different ways of talking about that core idea. We keep topics consistent even when including potentially diverse content. So you can see how we moved from cognition or research and cognitive science to transferring skills, to how skills aren't always easy to transfer because they're dependent on environments, and because of those, it makes something unreasonable. So you can see how even though the topic isn't always immediately about composition, it kind of always is. And so we rely on readers to make logical connections. We make readers think about like, okay, well, why would we start talking about skills here? Does it make sense to logically go there? If it does, it makes sense. If it doesn't, we need to maybe add more clearness about what that sentence or paragraph is about. And then again, we combine all of these elements to enhance our coherence, especially the further along you'll go, you'll get better at doing this. And so remember, this is, I think, maybe the most important, and we sort of see this in those sentences that we just looked at, is that writers normally put the topic in the beginning because often, if you know grammar, the topic is the subject of your sentence. What your sentence is about is going to be the subject. So now to review really quickly, you want to ask yourself, what is the about principle and what does it do? Can you answer that question? How do you use the about principle when reading? And similarly, how do you use the about principle when writing? Do you think you could do that? And then maybe this is most important. What confuses you most about the about principle? What do you wish you understood better? And if you have questions about it, you can always email me at cable@elgin.edu. And for that, that's it for this one. Have a good one. I'll see you in the next video.